Poland. We're watching part of exercise Dragon, which is part of exercise Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO drills since the end of the Cold War. British and Polish troops training here together as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence, and essentially as a show of force, a reminder of NATO's skills to dust off the capability of NATO forces to be able to deter Russian aggression.
So it's Polish and British infantry working together after a period of build-up training to be able to execute attacks and clearances in really complex terrain, such as the urban environment you just saw them operating in. There are 1,700 British soldiers deployed at the moment. That is the headquarters of the 7th Light Mechanised Brigade Combat Team, the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Anglian Regiment, the Scots Dragoon Guards, and then supporting forces from the Royal Engineers, Royal Artillery, Royal Signals, Royal Logistic Corps. Down over there you've got Polish tanks, Leopard tanks firing their main armament, which is a 120mm armament. They're also firing their chain gun. You've had Polish helicopters in the overhead firing their armaments as well, mainly chain gun. And then in depth you can hear American artillery and American mortars firing.
The British soldiers exercising out here in eastern Poland are the tip of NATO's spear. They are the very high readiness joint task force land, held at 48 hours notice to move at the commands of NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, Europe. Now, what we've seen already is British and Polish forces practicing fighting in built-up areas, taking buildings, houses one by one, as they would expect to do if they were fighting for a contested town or hamlet. But more broadly, this is exercise Dragon is part of a much larger exercise Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO military drills since the end of the Cold War. And of course, that is fundamentally about NATO preparing to go to war with Russia. But it's not just about preparing for war. The very act of exercise is also a show of force, and that show of force, NATO hopes, is also a deterrent. It's about demonstrating that the countries in this 32-nation alliance have the capability to fight and win together.
Half an hour ago in that building, which was that he is just so made up that you are all here. He is so pleased to have, kind of, as he put it, the Brits have landed, was his description. But not just any Brits, the desert rats. I mean, it just doesn't get better than that. The reason I wanted to come here is because although in Poland everyone knows that there's this big exercise going on, I would say back home most people are unaware of this enormous NATO exercise. Not just large, the biggest since the Cold War, the biggest for 40 years. Gorbachev was in power in the Soviet Union the last time something of this size happened. So this is really, really significant. And I want to make sure that people back home know not only that it's going on, but also the enormous British contribution to it, which you guys are right at the front line of. I think there's something like 90,000 personnel involved, maybe 96,000. We are producing 19% of those. So you guys are part of the biggest single contribution of any country has come from the UK. And that is, just to put that into proportion, there are 32 countries in NATO now, thanks to Sweden joining last week. 32 nations. We're providing 16,000 of the army, about 20,000 of the overall personnel. So we are not just contributing, we are over contributing to this extraordinary exercise, and it couldn't come at a more significant moment. You've got, last week I was in Ukraine talking to Zelensky, who, let's face it, needs all the help that he can be given, because this is a moment where a moment of decision, a moment where we have to show that we are not just up for it in words, but that we are prepared to put our money where our mouths are. So we had £2.5 billion, which we're giving to Ukraine this year as part of our work towards making sure they can help to liberate. Last week I announced 325 million in drones. So that technology I was just looking at over there with the drones, in 2 or 3 years' time, will be at another level entirely for our British Armed Forces. But I fear we need to do more. And one of the things we need to do is make sure that Putin understands that NATO is ready and that he can't just carry on moving west. And that is where you guys come in. That's why I'm so pleased to come here and see you all today. And thank you for what you're doing in person, and actually to reflect the words of my Polish counterpart half an hour ago. You guys are bloody heroes. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Keep it up, and thank you. I'm going to go back home and tell people about what you're doing. He is the person who's doing the saber rattling. There is no excuse for that. That's irresponsible of him. And actually, all that needs to happen to resolve this is he needs to drive back east and get out of a democratic country that he decided to invade 2 years ago. And that is the way to bring this whole thing to a conclusion. But it is absolutely irresponsible of him to talk about nuclear weapons in that way. Everyone agrees. It's just unnecessary and escalatory.